Hi, Luke Lango here. Now I'm about to put a list of stocks on screen for you, and I want you to take out a pen and paper, and I want you to write down the names and ticker symbols of each of them. Then, I want you to watch all of these stocks like a hawk over the next couple of weeks, because these stocks are special. Now why? Well, folks, it's no secret that the fastest way to double or even triple your money in today's market is to simply find a stock that the U.S. government wants to own and then buy it before Washington moves. And that's because over the past 6 months or so, the federal government has taken the radical step of putting millions of dollars into a small group of obscure, largely unknown stocks. I mean, first came MP Materials, and that stock soared 50% in a day after the Pentagon bought a huge stake back in July. Then came Lithium Americas. I mean, it soared 100% in a day after the Department of Energy bought into it in September. Then Trilogy Metals, which tripled overnight after the government bought in. Well, the stocks that I'm about to bring up on screen for you are the next group of companies that the White House is going to need to own. Now, folks, the official public stated reason for this sudden White House buying spree is to shore up America's domestic source of rare earth minerals and other natural resources, which, of course, have been the focus of negotiations with China all year long. But the real reason, which no one here in Washington wants you to know, is altogether more extraordinary, as you'll see shortly. And it actually points directly to the White House's next big move, which frankly is going to totally blindside millions of investors. Because right now, the entire world is speculating on which natural resource company the government could take a stake in next. I mean, Morgan Stanley even recently published a list of 39 resource stocks that could be next, though I must warn you that 28 of those stocks have already soared more than 100% in value, meaning that you've probably already missed the boat on that trade. I mean, even a rumor that Critical Medicals Corp could be next sent that stock soaring 275% before the White House actually stepped in altogether to deny that story. I mean, folks, every investor, every trader, every hedge fund manager out there, they're trying to guess which resource stock is next. But I'm here to show you that they all have this story totally wrong, because they're all looking at the wrong group of stocks. You see, I've learned that the White House is about to begin targeting a whole new part of the market. And once Wall Street recognizes what's coming, the market is going to shift dramatically overnight as investors scramble to target this surprising next group of stocks that the White House itself is preparing to buy. Now, of course, the question is, how do I know this? Well, the same way I knew that MP Materials would be the first stock the White House would buy. You see, I told my followers to buy that stock right before the White House bought it. Here's what happened next. Now, as it turns out, we weren't alone in that recommendation. I mean, many of Wall Street's most powerful hedge fund managers made millions on that trade, including funds run by Ken Griffin, Paul Tudor Jones, Joel Greenblatt, and even David Shaw. Now, as it turns out, the same thing was true of another stock the White House bought into, Trilogy Metals, because just days after that big breakout, Forbes reported that billionaire hedge fund owner John Paulson, he made $70 million overnight on that trade. So, how am I so sure that the White House is about to begin a new big stock buying spree? Let me head back to my studio and I'll explain everything in full detail. To be clear, I don't have any inside connection in the Oval Office or access to any non-public information, which of course would be illegal to share with you. But what I do have is a national defense document which lays out exactly what's going on and what's coming next. And my research points to a second wave of purchases that could happen any day now. Now move quickly, and I'm convinced that you have a second chance and maybe final chance to double or triple your money as the White House ramps up its buying spree. Now, I want to brief you on what's coming before it's too late. In fact, I'm going to bring you the names and tickers of over 100 of the stocks involved up on screen for you. Now, you don't have to pay anything for this information, but it could be hugely valuable to you, even if you only have $5,000 to put to work in the market. But first, of course, you might be wondering, why on earth would anyone give away information this valuable for free? Well, you have to understand, folks, this is not the first time that I've done something like this. You see, I recommended NVIDIA, I recommended Tesla, I recommended Bitcoin to my followers for free before each of them rose 1,000% or more. I share this information widely because, well, frankly, were it not for the goodwill of others, I wouldn't have been able to get where I am today. You see, I had not one, but two billionaire mentors while I was still in college. I was lucky enough to work for Bob Poole, the former hedge fund manager of Bricoleur Capital. I also ran research for another billionaire, Jeff Feinberg, who once managed a hedge fund for George Soros. And thanks to their gracious support, I managed to found my own investment research business in my sophomore year of college, while most of my friends were still out there flipping burgers. And it wasn't long before Fred Clare, the former general manager of the Dodgers, who was profiled in Michael Lewis's book Moneyball, by the way, recruited me to work with him too. So, put simply, I've made a career out of studying the financial markets for rare and unusual opportunities, and then I take pride in sharing those opportunities with thousands of people worldwide. You see, I recommended AMD stock back in 2015. Before that one soared as high as 13,500%. I also recommended Shopify, the e-commerce solutions provider, before that stock soared as much as 1,700%. I recommended GameStop before it soared as much as 12,000%, Luckin Coffee before it rose as high as 1,600%, and even Palantir before that AI darling rose as high as 1,200%. In fact, folks, in 2020, an independent website ranked 15,123 experts across my industry and named me number one. But I'm not here today to talk about any single stock opportunity like NVIDIA or Tesla or Palantir. This story is much bigger than that. You see, I want to give you a list of over 100 stocks right here in this video that I expect the White House to target next. In fact, let me share them with you right now. Now, the first thing you're thinking, I'm sure, is that this is a lot of stocks, and you're right. It is. And that's the first really important point that I want you to understand. Because the White House is going to buy shares in a lot more companies than anyone realizes. This is going to be the mother of all buying sprees. And frankly, I think the government is doing this because they don't really have a choice. You see, the real problem the government's trying to solve, which, like I said, no one in Washington really wants you to know, cannot simply be fixed by owning one or two or even three or four companies. I don't think anyone truly understands this, but once you see the National Defense Plan that I've seen, which, by the way, is called the NDIS Implementation Plan, it becomes obvious. Now, I wouldn't be surprised to see the government buy 20, 30, even 50 stocks before this is over, and I think they'll all be chosen right from the list that's on screen right now. But folks, that doesn't mean you should just go out and buy all of these stocks, which is frankly impossible for the vast majority of investors anyway. Instead, there are just five names on this list that I'd urge you to go out and buy immediately before the next phase of the government's big buying spree begins. Now, I'll tell you all about them over the next few minutes because I think that you could quickly double or triple your money on all of them as this story plays out, just as my followers had the chance to do so with MP Materials. You see, I wouldn't be surprised to see several of these stocks go up 1,000% or more long term. But to understand which stocks you need to own, you first need to know the single critical motivation that's actually causing the White House to target all these firms right now. It's the one thing that I'm certain keeps our president and many of his most trusted advisors awake every single night. Put simply, China now has the power to launch an economic Pearl Harbor attack on America. I know, that might sound crazy, but please hear me out. Give me just a few minutes to lay out the facts. You'll see that I'm right. And not only that, you'll see that our government is deadly serious about this risk too, serious enough to put billions of dollars on the line. Because the simple truth of the matter is this: China now wields a weapon that could bring America to its knees, both economically and militarily. Just consider. Right now, I'm guessing that you're either watching this message on a laptop, tablet, or smartphone, right? Well, did you know that the device in your hands, whether it is a laptop, smartphone, or tablet, couldn't function without a mineral called dysprosium? Now, you've likely never heard of dysprosium before. Most people haven't. It's one of the rare earth metals. You can actually see it down at the bottom of this periodic table with the other rare earth elements. But without it, your smartphone, your laptop, your tablet, they wouldn't work. And it's also crucial to a whole series of other technologies like the chips and data centers that are needed for artificial intelligence to work. I mean, folks, without dysprosium, NVIDIA's most advanced chips, they would not work. And its multi-trillion-dollar valuation would likely collapse. Without dysprosium, our military would be in big trouble. And that's because our F-35 fighter jets couldn't get off the ground. The missiles they fire wouldn't work. And the laser guidance systems they use to direct those missiles, those wouldn't function either. The same goes for our Navy's fleet of destroyers, our Virginia-class submarines, our Tomahawk missiles, our Predator drones, our tanks, our high-powered lasers, and even in the next-generation weapons we are building, like hypersonic weapons. You see, the problem, for us at least, is that 99% of this rare earth metal comes from this one location, a refinery deep inside communist China in the city of Wuxi, just outside of Shanghai. In other words, Beijing has a total chokehold on the global dysprosium supply. Now, that puts China in a position of immense power over the entire global economy, but more than that, it gives the Chinese Communist Party the power to bring the U.S. military, the most powerful military in the world, and indeed our whole economy, the biggest economy in the world, to a terrifying halt. That's a big problem. That is a colossal problem. But even bigger is the fact that China has this kind of power over dozens of different resources. It's not just dysprosium. And no matter what deal the president strikes with China to secure trade relations in the short term, this problem will not go away without the U.S. government making massive investments in publicly traded companies. The iPhone, for instance, contains at least 10 different rare earth elements. I mean, to make one, you need neodymium, dysprosium, praseodymium, yttrium, lanthanum, europium, terbium, cerium, and gadolinium. Now, it isn't important for you to understand what all of these minerals are or what they're used for. What is critical to understand is that China has the same level of control over all of these elements. Now, that's also true of rare earths that actually have nothing to do with iPhones. Take another rare earth mineral called samarium. It's another completely unknown metal, but each F-35 fighter jet has 50 pounds of samarium in it. And guess what? Beijing controls at least 60% of the global mineral supply and 90% of the refining capabilities. You know what our share is? Practically zero. Now let's look at another resource, antimony. That one is crucial to lots of highly advanced technology, from high-end AI chips all the way to nuclear weapons. And the problem is that China tightly controls the antimony market. I mean, 5 of the 10 biggest mines in the world are inside its borders. Now, China, alongside Russia and Tajikistan, together control 90% of global antimony production. As for us, well, according to the latest data from the U.S. Geological Survey, we aren't producing a single ounce of it. I think you can see the problem here. It's pretty clear. All told, rare earths are crucial to over 1,900 different weapons systems, including nuclear weapons. There's nearly 1,000 pounds of rare earth minerals in every F-35 fighter jet. There's nearly 6,000 pounds of rare earth minerals in every DDG-51 naval destroyer. And there's over 10,000 pounds of rare earth minerals in every Virginia-class submarine. And the problem is, for each and every one of these resources, China has total and complete dominance over the entire market. Right now, we rely on Beijing for 96% of our rare earths. Just think about that for a second. Our biggest economic and military rival, the country that's been gunning for our superpower status for decades, supplies 96% of the resources our economy and our military need to survive. But it only gets worse. I mean, when it comes to separating heavy rare earths, which are used for high-tech magnets and military applications, we rely on China for 99.9% of it. Now, this hasn't happened by accident either. In 1992, while visiting the Baotou rare earth mine in Inner Mongolia, China's leader Deng Xiaoping said, "The Middle East has oil. China has rare earths." Now, of course, the Middle East has infamously used its dominance of the oil supply to bring America's economy to a standstill in the 1973 oil embargo. You gotta ask, did Deng Xiaoping want China to hold the same kind of power over America? Because all the signs say yes. I mean, as one senior advisor to the Trump White House put it, China has crafted a policy that gives it the power to forbid any country on earth from participating in the modern economy. You see, at any moment, the Chinese government could cut off rare earth mineral exports to the U.S. market, crippling the AI-driven bull market and leaving our military paralyzed without the resources they need for nearly all of our advanced weapons systems. And that's not even the worst part. You want to know what is? We have almost no national stockpiles to speak of. Officials have already warned that we have just 60 days supply. That has insiders terrified. I mean, one defense industry source has warned that I can tell you we talk about this daily. And that, folks, is the reason the government has begun to make a string of investments in public companies. I mean, shortly after taking office, President Trump signed a series of executive orders designed to break the Chinese chokehold on rare earths and other key resources. Those orders quickly escalated into the stock buying spree that I'm telling you about. MP Materials, they own America's biggest rare earth mine. That was the first and easy, obvious buy. Again, I recommended that stock and it went on to double very quickly. It's risen as much as actually 180% since my call. Well, next up, you had Lithium Americas. What do? They supply the lithium that will be critical to our battery industry. That stock tripled in 4 months. And then came Trilogy Metals. They have a vast supply of other crucial natural resources, including zinc, copper, gold, silver, and guess what? That stock is up as much as 5-fold since July. Now, by the way, the government has already backed a whole series of other resource stocks too, far beyond what the media has reported. For instance, take Guardian Metal Resources, a tungsten miner based in Nevada. Now, tungsten is crucial to the military for everything from armor-piercing ammunition to tanks and vehicle armor, and the Defense Logistics Agency recently said that it needs 4.5 million pounds of it. But the problem is, according to one expert, to this day, they haven't filled 1 ton of it. It doesn't exist. So it should come as no surprise that the Department of War recently gave Guardian Metal Resources, which is developing a tungsten project in Nevada, $6.2 million to help get its new mine online. And it's even less surprising that the stock is now up 1,571% since the middle of 2023. Now, what's more, the government's interest in natural resources has triggered this massive rally across the entire sector of related companies. Northern Dynasty Minerals, for example, it's risen as much as 553%. USA Rare Earths is up as much as 552%. The Metals Company soared as high as 1,097%. U.S. Antimony Corporation is up 909%. Nova Minerals up 608%. And Critical Metals Corp has soared a staggering 2,010%. The pattern, once you see it, is pretty darn clear. First, the government identifies a crucial economic choke point that China controls. Then it backs a U.S. company that can help break that dominance, and then that company soars in value, dragging its entire sector up with it. This is what the NDIS implementation plan is all about. It lays out a detailed and specific plan to wrestle back control of the supply chains that are critical to our place as the world's dominant superpower. But if there's one thing that you take away from this presentation, please make it this. This plan goes much further than just stockpiling minerals. The White House wants total control and dominance over the super advanced technologies that will determine our country's survival for the next century. That, of course, starts with materials in the ground. You got to dig it up first, but it goes well beyond that. Now, I'll spare you reading the entire document because you don't need to know the full details of this very big, very powerful government initiative. But this quote from the writers behind it sums it up pretty well. This NDIS is a call to both the public and private sectors for focused, dedicated efforts to build and secure the industrial capability and capacity necessary to ensure our military has the material available to deter our potential adversaries and, if necessary, defeat them in battle. In fact, the Pentagon's plan is to dominate the supply chain, from mines to magnets. So in plain English, folks, what that means is the government plans to own a part of the entire technology industry. And I don't think anyone realizes just how important this is, at least not yet. It goes far beyond the natural resource sector, though if you follow the mainstream media, that's probably the only part of the story that you've heard about so far. This ultimately involves hundreds of stocks. I mean, it simply has to. A stockpile of critical resources is only the first phase in this plan. I mean, after all, what use of raw materials if China still controls the refining, the processing, and the manufacturing our economy and military relies on? I mean, consider, did you know that the single biggest supplier of critical technology to the Department of War isn't an ally like Britain or Japan, but China? I mean, I'm not talking about just raw materials here. I'm talking about finished weapons. Our biggest aerospace company, Raytheon, has thousands of Chinese suppliers and has already said that it would be impossible to operate without the Chinese industry. Think about that for a second. Imagine we relied on Germany or Japan to supply our military with tanks and munitions in World War II. Or we needed Soviet industry to build B-52 bombers in the Cold War. It'd be insanity. But that's exactly the situation we find ourselves in today. It's the same story in the medical industry, by the way. Did you know that China now controls nearly 90% of the active pharmaceutical ingredients that go into all kinds of drugs? I mean, it's shocking, but it's true. China has a chokehold over at least 700 crucial medicines that millions of Americans rely on, including drugs that treat heart disease, cancer, and even HIV. I mean, as one think tank put it, these aren't obscure drugs. They're foundational medicines, but America no longer makes them. Look at the battery industry, and it's the exact same story. Last year, America's biggest drone manufacturer had to start rationing its production because China cut off its supply of batteries. This is a huge multi-billion-dollar company with connections that reach right to the Pentagon, but even it was powerless to stop China's attack. Let's also think back to the pandemic, right? When disruption to China's industrial base led to all kinds of weird shortages here. Everything from PPE and ventilators to antibiotics and ibuprofen to silicon chips that left thousands of new cars stranded outside factories in Michigan. Now, imagine how rapidly our economy would grind to a halt if China deliberately used these economic choke points against us in a calculated economic Pearl Harbor attack. In other words, Beijing doesn't just control the raw minerals that we depend on for everything from iPhones to electric cars, missiles, and submarines. We're just as dependent on them for refineries, for medicine, for weapons, for all of it. Remember, we still rely on China to process 96% of all rare earths that are produced globally, and worse, 99.9% of the heavy rare earth separation processing. We rely on China for nearly 100% of our Benadryl, 97% of our antibiotics, 95% of our ibuprofen supply, and 70% of our acetaminophen supply. And as I mentioned earlier, China is still the largest foreign supplier of critical technologies to the Department of War. And what's more, we know Beijing isn't afraid to use this situation to its advantage, because in 2010, China actually cut off Japan's access to rare earth minerals after a dispute over a fishing trawler collision. And in 2023, China banned the export of rare earth extraction and separation technologies to the U.S., which led to the Select Committee on the Strategic Competition to publish a title report called A Strategy to Win America's Economic Competition with the Chinese Communist Party. And folks, as recently as October, China increased export bans to 12 of the 17 rare earth elements that are critical for chips and advanced weapons technologies. I mean, as JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon put it, the U.S. has allowed itself to become too reliant on unreliable sources of critical minerals, products, and manufacturing, all of which are essential for our national security. Folks, read that again. Dimon is spelling this out for you, and he's putting his money where his mouth is. A $1.5 trillion fund. Yes, trillion with a T. Let me put that into perspective for you. At the start of 2025, the entire global mining industry, all of it, was worth $1.6 trillion. In other words, JP Morgan is committing enough money to buy every single share of every single mining firm in every country on the planet. America, China, Russia, Australia, everywhere. Are you starting to feel in your bones how much money there is to be made in this space right now? And don't forget, this isn't just about critical minerals. It's about the entire supply chain. From raw materials to energy to our industrial base, all the way to finished products. Very soon, it's going to become obvious that the government isn't just securing resources. It's retooling the entire economy in a way we haven't seen since the Cold War. And that's why I'm so certain that the government is about to embark on a second wave of stock purchases, and I want to show you exactly which stocks to buy for the chance to profit from it. Which brings me, of course, back to the list of stocks that I shared with you earlier. Now, these are the stocks, folks. These are the stocks that I believe are going to be crucial to the next phase of government investment, which I believe is now imminent. I mean, every single stock on this list wound up here because they touch the mine to magnets supply chain, or because they are of strategic national security importance. Remember, a mines to magnets policy means investing in the entire defense and consumer technology supply chain, from miners all the way to the refineries and processing facilities needed to make minerals useful, to the energy producers that will power them, to the chips these minerals will produce, and even the hardware manufacturers that these chips will end up in. Folks, America is embarking on a mission to rebuild American supply chains and secure our economic and national security. I mean, regardless of your personal politics, that is something we can all be incredibly proud of. You see, you might assume that the NDIS implementation plan was a brainchild of the Trump administration, but get this, it was actually put into place by our former President Joe Biden in response to Chinese graphite restrictions. In other words, this situation has become so threatening to American lawmakers that it might be the only thing that both parties agree on right now, reestablishing our military and consumer technology supply chains. And guess what? That process is already well underway. Now, the next step will be for our government to invest in refineries, in processing plants, in the energy infrastructure that will be so critical to powering America's reindustrialization over the next several years. And after months of research, there are 5 stocks that I think you need to buy urgently. Stocks with the maximum upside potential from this story, using the same approach that I've used to find dozens of stocks that could have doubled your money in recent years. Just consider this. My model portfolio has more than 28 stocks that we've sold for over 100% gains. Take a look for yourself. So, of course, the question is, which stocks am I recommending that you buy today? Well, to answer that question, consider MP Materials, owner of America's biggest rare earth mine. It also owns America's only functioning rare earth processing plant, but even that plant sends a lot of the material it produces abroad for further processing. So in other words, even our best domestic supplier still relies on foreign powers. And that's why you can expect to hear a lot more about rare earth processing facilities in the very near future, with the White House almost certain to buy at least one more stock in this space. And that's the next big part of the story: processing. Right, Peter Thiel, billionaire backer, President Trump and J.D. Vance, very famous venture capitalist, he's already worked this out. He's building a uranium processing plant in Kentucky, which has many folks in the mainstream financial media wondering, will Lynas be the next stock that Washington targets? Now, if you've never heard of Lynas Resources before, it's owned by Gina Rinehart, the richest woman in Australia, who's been described by many as the female Donald Trump. In fact, she's regularly at Mar-a-Lago, most recently for Donald Trump's Halloween party. But I think there's a better place for your money than Lynas Resources. You see, the stock's already doubled this year. Plus, it's listed in Australia, which, kind of makes it harder to buy. Now, what's more, its main processing plant is actually located in Malaysia. I mean, that's 9,000 miles away from Washington, D.C., and a heck of a lot closer to China. Now, that means that, there's no doubt the White House is absolutely monitoring this stock. Lynas Resources doesn't quite solve our rare earth processing problems. Instead, there's another small company that's just about 1/8 the size of Lynas that I believe is a much more likely target. Now, you can buy shares for around $20 a piece, and if there's anywhere you are looking to invest $1,000 today, folks, this stock is the one that is flying completely under most people's radar right now. So the company I'm talking about, it's totally overlooked by most investors because the famous mine it owns has been explored since the 1960s and seen multiple owners and management teams. But here's the thing. It is sitting on the largest deposit of heavy rare earth elements in the United States, estimated at over 1 billion tons. This company already has a magnet manufacturing facility that is planned to begin operating in early 2026, and they recently acquired a midstream business to complete their own mine-to-magnet strategy. Now, thanks to this acquisition, this company is going to be able to take the rare earth minerals it actually produces from its mine and turn those minerals into advanced magnets for the consumer, electric, and defense markets. I mean, even if this company never receives a single dollar from the government, when headlines announce that this company is producing magnets at scale early next year, there's really no telling how high the stock could go. That's probably why Sergey Brin, one of the co-founders of Google, owns a 7% stake in this company. And folks, at just a $1 billion market cap, the government wouldn't have to shell out much cash to own a big piece of this company. And that's why I said, if you have $1,000 to invest today, there might not be any better place to park your money right now. Now, I'll tell you how to access the name and ticker symbol of this little-known firm in just a minute, but remember, this story is much bigger than raw materials. And one place a vast amount of these rare earths are going to end up are in the chips that are so crucial to the AI industry. Now, that may sound obvious. For years, the government has done everything it can to support the chip industry. Right back in 2022, the Biden administration launched the CHIPS Act, a $280 billion effort to secure America's semiconductor industry. And though the Trump White House has canceled many Biden initiatives, it's actually gone further with the CHIPS Act and taken a 10% stake in giant semiconductor firm Intel. I mean, that's why there are so many semiconductor stocks on my list. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see the government use the CHIPS Act to start taking direct stakes in more semiconductor stocks very soon. Intel was just the first domino. Now, let's take one of the biggest names of them all. Should you buy AMD before the White House does? Now, I don't think there's an analyst on Wall Street that denies that this stock, AMD stock, is on the White House's list. I mean, the firm was started by a Silicon Valley legend named Jerry Sanders. AMD is a global powerhouse worth nearly $500 billion. This year alone, the stock's up 105%. It's become one of the hottest ways to play AI stocks this year, but most people actually don't know about AMD is that they don't actually manufacture their chips. They just design them. And frankly, that's a big problem because cutting edge tech companies in America, they need a reliable source of microchips. I mean, Elon Musk even recently said that he thinks he is going to need to build an entire new factory just to service the needs of his companies. Meanwhile, there's another firm that I expect to be targeted by the US government for investment that actually does manufacture chips. They actually make the chips. And get this. That company was started by the same guy who founded AMD, Jerry Sanders. Now, the best part is that at just 1/25th the size of AMD today, you can get in for less than $40 a share, which, of course, is something I recommend you do right away. You see, at some point soon, a lot of people are going to realize that this small firm could be the linchpin of the Trump administration's push to bring key consumer and defense technology production back to the United States. That's one of the key reasons the company has formed a critical partnership with Google, and it's spending $16 billion on new manufacturing right here in the USA. And we know the management team actually gets along really well with the government because in 2023, they inked a deal with the Department of War to supply them with their U.S.-made semiconductors for the next 10 years for a total of over $3 billion. And last year, this firm inked a deal with the Department of Commerce as part of the CHIPS Act that awarded the company another $1.5 billion to expand U.S. production of its semiconductors. And folks, if that isn't enough to convince you that the tiny firm I'm talking about is on the government's target list, just consider this piece of evidence. Their corporate jet was recently spotted at an airport in Florida, and rumors are that company executives were there for an important meeting at nowhere else than Mar-a-Lago. Again, folks, at 1/25th the size of AMD today, you can get into this company for less than $40 a share. And I believe it easily has 5 to 10 times potential once people realize this company is the key to Trump's entire domestic manufacturing agenda. But again, that's not the only stock that I think you should buy today. Now, let's go back to our master list of potential government targets and have a look. Dell, they've already built an AI factory for the government. So could Washington be lining up to buy them next? Well, there's no doubt our government is looking at Dell right now. That seems pretty obvious to me. I mean, the company's already been selected as a key AI partner for the government, as well as the European Union and South Korea. And what's more, one of Dell's subsidiaries has already won a $795 million contract directly from the Department of War. So should you buy the stock? Well, you could. You absolutely could. And you're probably going to do okay on it. But Dell's already a $100 billion company. And it isn't well known for being on the cutting edge these days. But what we do know is that the current administration loves innovation and companies that are not afraid to move fast and scale their businesses very quickly. And that's why I think there's a better way than Dell to play this story. You see, I've been tracking a firm that is just a third the size of Dell that trades for just $50 a share. Because semiconductors in a warehouse don't make a data center. These data centers, they require a lot of components. AI servers, racks, liquid-cooled technology. They need all of it to keep these extremely expensive semiconductors working at optimal capacity. Well, the small firm that I'm talking about, they build all these related hardware technologies in Silicon Valley, and they have plans to expand nationwide. This year, the company struck a deal with Elon Musk's xAI to construct a 100,000 GPU Colossus supercomputer in Memphis in just 122 days. In other words, this company was able to build one of the biggest AI supercomputers in the world in under 4 months. So, it should be no surprise that the company recently forecasted 2026 revenue growth, and it is an astounding 56% increase from this year. I mean, folks, let that sink in. This company is growing at 56% year over year, and you can still get shares for just $50 a piece. I mean, this is essentially the crown jewel of the AI build out in America right now. And even if it never gets a single dollar from the U.S. government, this stock could still easily make you 5 times to 10 times in the next few years. Now, of course, if the government does step in with a direct investment, as I believe it will, you could see those kinds of gains not in years, but in months. And that's why I highly recommend that you buy a stake in this firm right away. Now, if you want to learn the names of these companies, their ticker symbols, all that stuff, you're going to find a full write-up of all 3 of these buy recommendations I've just told you about in a brand new report that I put together for you. Now, I'll show you how to get a copy of it in just a second, but first, there are a couple of other key choke points in the AI supply chain that the government is absolutely going to target. Now, one of them is energy. And that's because, I mean, you've probably read about this, right? Artificial intelligence demands an insane amount of power to function properly. And right now, we do not have anything like the kind of energy we're going to need. I mean, for instance, do you know that soon AI data centers are going to consume more power than almost every country on Earth? I mean, if data centers were a country, they'd be 4th in the world for power demand. Now, right now, there are 1,240 AI data centers in the US that have either been completed or are under development. Each one of them uses as much energy as a small city. I mean, just think about that. Imagine that we built 1,240 new cities in the space of a few years. Now, if that's hard to picture, just consider this chart from a former OpenAI insider predicting AI's energy needs. Now, imagine the huge stress that would put on our energy grid. I mean, energy insiders are already predicting that we're going to see massive shortages, rolling blackouts, and price hikes before long. In fact, on Amazon's most recent earnings call, the CEO, Andy Jassy, said, today, overall in the industry, the bottleneck is power. So what do we do? Well, Silicon Valley, they've already given us the answer. You see, Microsoft is paying to power up 3 Mile Island again. Meta just signed a 20-year nuclear energy deal. Google is funding 3 nuclear sites to power its AI data centers, and Amazon just signed a huge deal with the big nuclear firm in Pennsylvania. So I'm predicting it won't be long before the U.S. government joins the party. You see, the government's AI action plan published in July 2025 explicitly states that we need to build and maintain vast AI infrastructure and the energy to power it. Simply put, we need to build, baby, build. I think we'll go a little bit further than just building. Mark my words, we're going to see the White House effectively nationalize parts of our energy industry. And that's why my master list of government buys has so many power companies on it. I bet if you've been paying attention to the mainstream financial media recently, you're probably wondering, is the government going to buy nuclear energy giant Constellation Energy? You see, Constellation Energy is America's biggest nuclear energy company. They're already supplying 13 different government agencies with power, and it just landed $1 billion in combined contracts from the U.S. General Services Administration. And not only that, but it has a huge deal with Microsoft already in place. And in June of 2025, it signed a 20-year energy supply deal with Meta. Sounds good, right? Well, the problem is, it's already a big company. I mean, it's already worth $118 billion, and its share price is already up 831% over the last 5 years. Again, I do think that you could do well on the stock, but I also think there's just a better place to move your money today, which has much higher upside potential. Now, I'm talking about a U.S. firm that specializes in the production of SMRs, which is short for small modular reactors. You see, in our country, it takes, at least 10 years to get a new nuclear reactor online, and no amount of red tape cutting can build a new reactor overnight. Sure, you got coal, natural gas, solar, wind. Yeah, they're all going to contribute to expanding energy infrastructure in the U.S. But when it comes to creating these big increases in consistent clean energy to power the AI build out, the obvious choice is SMRs. They're cheaper. They're portable. They roll out of a factory ready to be installed practically anywhere. They can be hooked up directly to a data center ally in Virginia or to a remote mining operation in Alaska. And there's one firm making SMRs that I believe is an obvious choice for the government to target next. And that's because this company can deliver an SMR in 2 years. 80% faster than a traditional nuclear reactor. In May 2025, the CEO of this firm had a meeting with the president at the White House. And the following month, they inked a major deal with the Department of War to supply energy for one of the Air Force's most remote Arctic bases. Then, in August, the firm was selected by the Department of Energy for 3 reactor pilot programs that will be completed by the middle of 2026. See the pattern here? These things are not random, folks. Now, if you're still skeptical of just how likely it is that this firm receives an investment from the government in the near future, consider this. The Secretary of Energy, Chris Wright, he was a board member of this firm before he joined the government. And today, the business, which is just 1/5 the size of Constellation, has the premier technology and first mover advantage in the rapidly growing segment of SMRs. But folks, before I share how to get the names of these firms in your hands right away, there's one more name I think you need to add to your list. You see, energy is not just the linchpin for the AI race. It's also going to determine geopolitical and military power in the decades ahead, just frankly as it has throughout history. And one firm stands at the center of supplying the energy our military needs to command the most important theater of all future conflicts. It is the sole provider for the nuclear reactors and fuel that power all of our country's 71 nuclear-powered submarines and our nuclear-powered aircraft carriers. In other words, we're talking about a legal monopoly on providing these products to the U.S. military. And production of these submarines is ramping up. Now, the U.S. is currently expecting 12 new Columbia-class nuclear submarines that have been ordered. Earlier this year, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth said he thinks those numbers need to go up. And in July, Canada also announced that it was looking to procure 12 more submarines to patrol their coastline, a bigger coastline than any other country on Earth has to defend. And then in October, President Trump himself pushed his support behind a new defense agreement that would supply U.S.-made submarines to both the UK and Australia.